Let's begin a new trading week here on the Final Bell on the Roller Radio Network. I'm Joe Gangwish. Clint Hoffman is our guest from Trados, based in Lincoln, Nebraska. We'll take a look at Monday's trade, see how we feel about things. Lower day on corn. Finally, on soybeans, it ended lower after being higher much of the day. Wheat was also lower on the day today. So, Clint, give us your take here. First of all, what was the general feeling for a Monday?
It was definitely, like you said, closing lower on the beans. Kind of took the wind out of the market sales. Corn was 3 lower all day. Beans are up 8 starting this morning and then closed half lower. And wheat, which has kind of been a dog for a long time, is down 5.
Let's give you the toll-free number, 844-880-0880. Use the hashtag FinalBell on Twitter and tweet to us at RRN Markets if you have a question. Here for the Final Bell, we're on the Roll Radio Network. As we talked about, Clint Hoffman is our guest from Trados. So, Clint, the corn just locked down all day today. Not a lot of buying interest, as you mentioned, after the overnight trade. What was the bigger story in corn?
I think a lot of it's still from that report. We're going to have close to 170 yield, it looks like, on corn. And even if they do bring that down to 168 or 169, the fact of the matter is we're still going to have a big corn carryout. We're looking at a 2.335 carryout. It's just a lot of corn to deal with. So we continue to stay in that 345 to 362 range, and until we can break out of that, that just seems like the market we're going to be in for a couple weeks.
Well, it does kind of feel that way, that we don't really have a lot of interest in buying corn right now, and there are some people taking out some early dry land corn. Hearing anything on yield yet?
Yeah, it's been all over the place, but there has been some areas of the country where that first planted corn, which got a good start, has been a little better than expected. So I think that's what you're going to see, just a lot of variability. There is that 10 to 15% of the corn belt that had dry enough weather that it's going to affect the yields, but then in areas like the southeast and up north where they caught some rains that saved that crop, up in the Dakotas, there's been some surprises on how good the yields are also, and I think that's what showed up on the USDA reports, that yield's a little higher than what people are thinking.
Yeah, we've heard that from some other folks too, that the early dry land yields as we work south to north have ended up being better than expected. So anything could happen. We could have those better than expected yields all across the belt this year, couldn't we?
Yeah, we sure could, and that just reiterates the fact that we have a lot of corn to deal with, and soybeans also. You look at that carryout being close to 475 million bushels. It's definitely going to weigh on things. The bean market's acted stronger than corn and wheat relatively. We're trading about 50 cents off the lows on soybeans. The low we made a couple months ago is 907, and then the next low is 920. After the report last week, it was 940, and we bounced 30 cents off of that. So I think the demand out of China, a little bit of dry weather in South America, and a higher chance of La Nina is probably lending a little more support to that market than the others.
Let's talk about seasonals. That was something we wanted to discuss on the program. Some of the seasonals going on right now in corn. Also basis, have we continued to see some stronger basis numbers here where we have ethanol plants in Nebraska?
There is in certain areas, with harvest being a little bit later. If a guy can get a package together and try to negotiate some basis levels, I think it's worth locking that in. The bean basis was decent a couple weeks ago, and then it backed off. So if there's some improvement in that going into harvest the next couple weeks, it's probably worth trying to lock that in and see. I know it doesn't work the best logistically at harvest, but the processors are decent, and maybe we'll get another pop out of some of those areas. So just make sure you check out what those bids are and see what we can get done. As far as futures on the seasonal, there was a sell signal on corn and beans last week, and that goes through October 2nd. So 2 weeks from today is the traditional low that we make in both those markets, just following a strict 15-year seasonal. And last year we made the low, August 31st, and so far it was again this year. So we're probably trying to find a bottom, but just not a lot of reason for the markets to break out higher either. So I'd look for a sideways to lower market into that October 2nd time frame, and then we'll see if we can't get, once we get into harvest, everybody talks about harvest pressure. It seems like I've watched markets rally quite a few times right during harvest, so we'll see if we hopefully are finding that seasonal low as far as the futures markets go into October 2nd.
You're in tune to the Final Bell on the Rural Radio Network. Clint Hoffman is our guest from Trados. If you have a question for Clint, 844-880-0880, or tweet to us at RRN Markets. We'll catch your question there. So that brings up the question, Clint. We've been talking to maybe some other guys about this too. Storage situation. Are we going to have enough storage this fall if we have a lot of corn, as maybe could be anticipated?
There could be some issues at some elevators, and that's what we tried to talk to some guys about, estimating how much corn we're going to have to take somewhere at harvest, and if we can try to put some in the bin and dry it and pull it back out, take it to an ethanol plant to take advantage of some basis opportunity along those fronts. The guy should try to work on that, because if we get like right in the gut slot of harvest, you might see at your local elevators some pretty wide basis levels with a lot of corn just coming in from old crop, and then looks like a pretty big harvest in most areas coming in. And then we'll see that seasonality of basis. It seems like by Thanksgiving everybody's wrapped up with harvest and closes the bin doors, and basis really makes a big pop right after harvest and into that Thanksgiving and Christmas time frame. So on what you can store, there'll be better opportunities ahead as far as basis levels on that.
Clint Hoffman is our guest from Trados here on the Final Bell. That first segment always goes pretty fast. We're going to take a quick break here. Back with more here on the Rural Radio Network. This is the Final Bell. You're listening to the Rural Radio Network. Clint Hoffman with us on a Monday. Clint from Trados, based in Lincoln, Nebraska. He's ready to take your market question, 844-880-0880, or at RRN Markets on Twitter. And one last thing I was going to ask you, Clint, here on the corn is, in case some guys run into some storage trouble as they start to get into the corn a little bit, if they do have to sell some on the combine to at least have some room for later bushels, you guys could probably help them with the strategy.
Yeah, as far as our guys go, we have hedges in place, so whatever we have to move off the combine, we're pulling hedges and just negotiating the best basis level we can. If you don't have those sales in place, the guy can look at re-owning that on the futures market if we think we're too low on the board and making that seasonal low at this time. So there's definitely better ways to do it than just taking it uptown and paying storage costs on it, which can eat up prices pretty fast when you start paying a few cents every month on grain storage. So we feel there's some better ways to do it that we could definitely discuss with you.
And, of course, we do have some beans out there that are ready. Some guys might even be listening to us on the combine right now. What have you heard from some of your clients on beans so far?
So far, they're coming in pretty good. I've only had a couple clients going, but the yield's been really good. I have south of Lincoln had a couple guys picking corn, and they were very happy with how it's coming in so far, probably on some of their worst fields. So at least in this area, we're going to have a lot of bushels to deal with.
Now, Commitment to Traders report, what's the last numbers that you had and how that could be affecting things?
Those numbers come out on Friday, which is as of last Tuesday. So we have the fund short beans, 4,000 contracts, and corn, 119,000. So as far as looking at that, you can tell with beans being the furthest off their low, that reflects in the fund position being close to flat. But corn being barely off the lows and fund still short about 120,000 contracts, you would think that at this seasonal time of the year we're not going to have a lot of fund selling pressure on that side of things.
Well, we had kind of held the position a little bit on beans. I imagine we didn't do too much chart damage to beans today, did we?
No, we can't seem to push through that 975, 980 levels, so we need a close over that to try to get a run at 10. I think I mentioned this earlier, but our last three lows have been consecutively about 15 to 20 cents higher, so at least we're making higher lows as we go through on the charts, and that should be giving us confirmation that we're close to a low as far as the futures markets go. But if we get back towards that $10 mark on beans, I think there just wasn't a lot of chances this last year to sell well, you had plenty of chances, but that summer rally didn't last very long, over 10. So if we get back to that mark, I think it'd be a good place to look at making sales again. And then as far as corn, if you look at the carry, there's pretty decent carries. If you look at March is at 360, just shy of 365, and you got July at 380. So you get a 20 to 35 cent rally. We put those deferred contracts close to 4. I think that's a good place to look at futures levels and then try to trade a good basis after that.
All right, let's wrap up by talking about livestock. First of all, in the cattle, we had some late cash trade last week. How do you think that transfers over this week?
There was. We had some early strength this morning on cash cattle. A bunch traded Friday evening and some even Saturday at that 106 level. In the meat at 166 to 168 on Friday afternoon. So it might be closer to confirmation that we've saw a low in the cash markets. Last year that didn't happen until the middle of October when we got down to $1. But we traded in that 105 mark pretty thinly, and then we were up $1 last week. So if we could see boxed beef start to creep a little higher, which it did today, we're still in that 188 to 192 or 3 on the choice and select, but if we could see that stabilize and start creeping higher, it'd be closer to a confirmation that we're seeing a seasonal low in the cash market. If you mentioned that seasonal, it happened last year in October, and usually it's actually earlier in the year, so should be getting close.
I was just going to ask you about maybe some trends, expectations here going into fall and winter time on cattle.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier. Usually you have a decent drop in production from fourth quarter to first quarter. Usually it's about 150 to 400 million pounds, and this year it's estimated to be 785 million pounds. So a lot bigger drop from fourth quarter to first quarter of next year. And you can see that with the carry in the futures market. We got a just shy of a $10 carry on the board into February. So I would think at that 120 mark, a guy there's a lot of carry in that market to participate in. So I think that's how a guy has to play that. If we get some rallies, use puts or put some hedges on part of your production to take advantage of those higher prices in the deferred cattle months.
Clint Hoffman has been our guest from Trados. 402-858-9967 is Clint's direct number, or go to gotrados.com on the web for their contact information. Go to ruralradio.com on the podcast page to hear our podcast, or you can search Rural Radio in iTunes or TuneIn. That's the Final Bell. Thanks for joining us on this Monday. Have a great afternoon. I'm Joe Gangwish here on the Rural Radio Network.